Okay, welcome to another episode of Wired for STEM. My name is Tim Conlin, and I lead marketing for Snap Circuits. And as always, on this podcast, we talk about various topics in the STEAM space, and we couldn't be happier with our guest today. We tried to bring value to educators, and today we just have a spectacular guest and an incredibly relevant topic. And that topic is making STEM instruction work for the real world. Obviously, just a tad important. And today we've just got a fantastic individual. His name is Jeff Remington. And let me just take a second to talk about Jeff and all the great things that he's done, because we've got a real expert here with us today. So Jeff is a veteran STEAM educator. He's a global consultant. He's an incredibly passionate advocate for transforming how STEM is taught and experienced. He's got nearly 4 decades in education. And he's dedicated his career to helping schools and systems move beyond siloed, maybe contrived STEM toward authentic learning that truly connects directly to the real world and the workforce. And Jeff certainly knows the topic. He spent 25 years as a secondary STEM teacher in Pennsylvania and 25 years as an adjunct professor at Lebanon Valley College. So he shaped both classroom practice and the next generation of educators. And today, Jeff continues that mission as a STEM outreach liaison with Penn State Center for Science in the schools, where he works to amplify this impact of research and build partnerships across not just education, but also industry and communities. His influence really extends far beyond the classroom. As a national STEM teacher ambassador, he's contributed to STEM policy. He's played a key role in revising Pennsylvania's science and STEM standards. And his work has also taken him around the world, supporting education systems in both resource-rich and resource-challenged environments. From the U.S. to Haiti to the UAE, Jeff has certainly been around. His work and his passion have earned him some really spectacular recognition at every level. That's including the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching and selection as a top 50 finalist for the Global Teacher Prize. Well, Jeff, I know that was a long intro, but you have a lot of great things. I just wanted to make sure people know we've got someone really fun to have a good conversation with today. So welcome so much.
Thank you, Tim. I'm very, very grateful to be here. Grateful for this opportunity.
That's great, Jeff. And I talked a lot about your intro, right? And it's quite a story. So I would love for you to start by just talking a little bit about your story. You're originally a straight up educator and then into higher education and research and more. And I think it'd be really valuable for people to hear a little bit about those transitions and what motivated for you to continually move on and up.
Sure, happy to do it. The reason I got to where I am is because I didn't want to intentionally climb any ladder. I just wanted to do better every day, and through time, opportunity after opportunity kind of presented itself, and I find myself here at a major national institution of higher ed. So for me, it started 40 years ago. I started my teaching in a small town called Palmyra, right next to Hershey, PA. And the same year I started teaching, met my beautiful wife, Helen. And it just so happened her husband, or excuse me, her husband, just so happened her father was an analytical chemist for Pittsburgh plate glass. And he was a phenomenal researcher. And he also liked to do outreach. So he took me to a Pittsburgh Spectroscopy Society event at Duquesne University, where they had a gentleman who was doing science demonstrations, all sorts of fun things, burning things, blowing things up, things that you could reproduce in your classroom. And this gentleman had a book that you could use and do these things. So me as a brand new teacher, I'm thinking, great, I don't have any tools. This would be fun to have some tools. And, if I could do this, the kids would like me. If the kids like me, their parents will like me. If their parents like me, the administration will like me. It will give me job security. So I started off burning things, blowing things up, thinking that the kids would love it. And they did, but also thinking they're really going to want to learn from this. And although there was some curiosity with them, most of them wanted me to do more of that edutainment, that what I call a random act of STEMness. Because what I realize now, looking back 40 years ago, I was using a bunch of shiny tools when I started because didn't have any tools, but I didn't have a vision for how to use those tools. And I see that same thing happening right now with AI. There are tons of fancy tools out there for AI. And when we use those tools without a vision or a purpose, you kind of come to some realizations that I did. But anyhow, getting back to that. So I am doing all these fun, fancy demos, burning things and blowing things up and all that, and really got to be quite good at it and an act for it. And then one of the major publishing companies said, you're doing some good work. We would like you to be a writer for us on the side to write activities and this and that. And as I did that, they flew me to the corporate office and they said, here's what we want you to do. We want you to make it fun and engaging for the kids, easy for the teachers. And that's what I was good at because that's what I was doing myself. But then I started to think, wait a minute, how about learning? How about workforce development? How about preparing them for the future? None of those things were mentioned in this. And as I started to teach, I really started to realize this is shallow. These are just fun, kind of one off things, random acts of STEMness. What's my vision for these kids? Where do I want them to go? So at that point, I got a master's degree, a graduate degree, and I got it in workforce development because I thought that's going to help me figure this out to see what's the workforce looking for. And as I was going through that degree, and as I was watching my father-in-law, who's the analytical chemist researcher, the stuff that he's doing and the stuff that I'm learning about workforce development looks like nothing that I'm seeing in my K-12 environment, or nothing that I'm doing, and nothing that I'm writing about in these books. So I really started to go on a journey and find out, are there research-based programs out there that not only prove that if you apply these programs faithfully, that you're going to get results and that you're going to train this next workforce. And at that time in the 90s, there weren't many groups doing that. The Lawrence Hall of Science out of UC Berkeley was doing it, and they birthed more Nobel laureates in science than any other university. So I thought they know what they're doing. So started doing that. The internet came about this time. So I thought, well, as you mentioned, I received an award, the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. That came with $10,000. So I had $10,000 burning a hole in my pocket. I thought, what can I do with this? And then there was a researcher at Penn State, Hershey Medical Center, that had schools in Haiti. And I said, well, Dr. Mortel, Roderick Mortel, Dr. Mortel, what do you do for STEM in Haiti? And he's like, well, we really don't do anything. They have a book and they kind of memorize it, and that's the national culture. So I thought, can we change that? So at that time, there was a book out there called The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman from the New York Times. And he hypothesized that now that we have the internet, it's going to democratize learning and access to the global market. So this is a way that every place in the world could contribute to solving global problems and could get access to the global market. So long story short there, my kids partnered with kids that we had in Haiti, and I went back and forth to Haiti, and we built labs down there. We built, with the help of MIT's One Laptop Per Child, we built computer systems. Intel got involved. And then my kids were learning for a purpose. They were learning science and technology to teach their peers in Haiti about science and technology. And long story short, 20 years after the fact, a lot of those kids in Haiti went on to do amazing things and did plug into the global economy and solve major problems, including help navigate Haiti through the pandemic. So it was kind of cool. And my students learned all about how to do that. We built a wiki during that time, which this was before there were things like Canvas and Schoology. We built those learning management systems, my kids and the kids in Haiti, and we were teaching through Skype and through that and through YouTube. It was just an amazing thing. So about that point, I was offered by the Penn State College of Medicine to be a community member on an NIH committee, National Institutes of Health committee, called Recombinant DNA and Biosafety Committee. All research institutions that do work with humans are required to do that. So there again, I'm spending one day a month embedded with all these researchers. And as I'm looking around at this workforce, this environment, they're not doing anything that really looks like what I've been doing in my classroom. So again, it's giving me a shift that I've got to move from just fancy tools that are one-offs, random acts of STEMness to what can we be doing to get these people ready, these kids ready for the workforce. And what I noticed the researchers were doing, they were doing a lot of what I would call convergence. They were working with other researchers in other fields to solve complex problems. They were all self-trained computer scientists because they had to develop programs to help them analyze their data. They were just doing a lot of complex things and really doing it very well and collaborating. At that point in time, I noticed our standards in Pennsylvania were the same standards that were being used since they were developed, conceived back in 1996. This is 10 or more years before there were even cell phones. And here we are in the 2000s, and we're using standards that were being assessed on that are that old. So I thought, what can we do to move the needle here? So, with some help with many others, we started a grassroots movement and got these new, what we call three-dimensional standards in there, similar to next generation science standards, but more tailored to Pennsylvania, called STEELS. From there, got to do some consulting work in the United Arab Emirates to help them flip their country into this curiosity through career workforce development. The Emirates at that point were realizing that the fossil-based fuel economy, although good, they needed to diversify into this more smart-based technology. So we were part of that plan. By about that point, I was close to retiring, did retire for a day, and then Penn State hired me in this new position called a STEM outreach liaison for the Penn State Center for Science in the school. And we are a broader impacts unit.
Holy cow. I mean, Jeff, I think all of us strive to, do something we enjoy, do it well. And when you lay your head down at the end of the night, did I make a difference, right? And did I move forward? Did I continually do something? And from Palmyra to Haiti to Penn State to UAE, like, oh my gosh, what a great and inspirational story for folks that are educators today, maybe starting out or have been in their role for quite some time and are hungry to do more. And I just think that's a fantastic story of inspiration. So thank you for sharing that. That's really great. And as you said, now you're this STEM outreach liaison in non-retirement. You continue to do great things. Can you talk a little bit about that work? I know we've touched base a little bit on it in the past with Dr. Kathy Hill and some of the real world examples of where this is coming to life of the work you're doing now.
Yes. So first, I'll mention what this work is. We are what's called a broader impact unit. Sometimes people call it a research impact unit. Sometimes people call these society impacts. It is something that all major universities that are research universities have. They have units like us doing this work. And it is all about research universities getting federal grants for research. So if any big, what they call them R1 university, research university, wants to get a federal grant for engineering research, agriculture research, bio research, they're judged on two merits. The first merit is their intellectual merit, and that is, what is it that the researcher's doing that's going to advance that researcher's field and would impress the peers? Okay, researchers are very good at that. They're very focused, so they've got it there. The other merit they're judged on is this broader impacts, research impacts, society impacts, that merit. And that is sort of giving back to the taxpayers, because if we as a collective taxpayer are giving $10 million to a researcher to study squid tentacles, we might say, is that the best use of our $10 million? So the federal government requires that these researchers give back part of their knowledge and their research to several different buckets. One bucket would be infrastructure, one bucket would be national defense. The bucket that we specialize in is what we call curiosity through career workforce development. So every week we are with a different researcher learning what they do. One week it could be ag, the next week it could be pharmacology, the next week it could be material science. We're learning what they do. We write that into their grants and translate that into K-12 programming. That's either teacher professional development or direct programming with students, where we are teaching them the most authentic, cutting edge STEM workforce development that is currently out there. So some of the things we're working on right now, we are working on behalf of the Pennsylvania Department of Education on what we call an AI learning and listening tour. We have 10 AI researchers and policy researchers from Penn State that we are leading a tour all over Pennsylvania to learn, what are some things that schools are doing with AI? What are some things that needs, some consideration or some help on? And our researchers are also informing these K-12 educators and administrators as we're going around with that. We have energy challenges that we do. So we run the Pennsylvania Energy Challenge with our engineers here. And we do a Kid Win Challenge where kids create wind turbines that generate electricity. We put them into an engineering wind tunnel and we rate how much electricity and how they can generate and how sustained it is. We do the same thing with solar in that competition. We currently are working on a $5 million National Science Foundation grant that's part of the CHIPS and Science Act, and that is part of what's called the National STEM Teacher Corps. And that was a vision in the CHIPS and Science Act to elevate educators all over the country to get them to retool and reimagine to prepare this future workforce for this age of AI. And we were one of 7 institutions that received that grant. So we are currently training 27 phenomenal teachers from New Jersey, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania over the next 5 years to make them super teachers. And they are in turn going to influence their peers and elevate things in their region. And then we also do a lot of work with research experience for teachers, where we'll take classroom teachers and embed them with researchers at many of our institutions across the state at Penn State, where they'll work with AI researchers, ag researchers, engineers. They will work side by side with them in their laboratories for about 7 weeks in the summer. And we work with them on the education aspect of what they're learning and help them translate those experiences into classroom programming or classroom mindsets so that they can help their students get ready for the authentic workforce that awaits them in STEM.
Wow, fantastic. I love how you're continually pushing. You talked about retooling, reimagining. How do we do things better? How do we make it more impactful? Really, really fantastic work there. So exciting. And maybe it's in the neighborhood, but as we talked and we did some research, I talked about this notion of convergence education. And when we talk about retooling, reimagining, doing things differently, can you talk a little bit about that approach and then how it's actually showing up and how you're bringing that to life?
Yeah, be happy to. Be happy to. So, first of all, when I think of convergence, I think of coming together. And my mental image of that is if you could picture a group of people climbing a rugged mountain. And as they're climbing to try and get to the top of that rugged mountain, they're using ropes, they're using each other, they're encouraging each other. They find maybe some fog in an area and they have to figure out, oh, we were going to go this pathway, but now we have to shift because there's fog there. And maybe there's a bit of an avalanche over here or some rock debris. So the whole time they're going up the mountain, they're assessing the shifting situation and they're using everyone's combined knowledge and expertise and talents to navigate this massive mountain to get to the top. That to me is the vision that I have of conversion. The opposite of conversion is kind of what's been traditional education, and that is just a series of single ladders to try and get to the top of a wall or an obstacle. And when you picture single ladders, by its design, it is sort of a siloed type of an experience. You're kind of going by yourself. You're going on a very set pathway, rung by rung by rung, and your focus is what's the next rung? What's the next rung? What's the next rung? And really, that pathway may have been good for defined positions and jobs and circumstances that we've had for the past, you know, multiple decades. But as we will all know with AI, things are shifting. And I feel like the approaches where you're just totally relying on that ladder to advance in a subject or in a career pathway, you are very vulnerable to AI impacting that single siloed approach. Whereas in the current state we're in with AI and automation, if you really take this convergence approach of really leveraging multiple knowledge sets, multiple subject areas, and use that in the collaboration and learning to pivot and to iterate and to move in different directions to get to the top. That's really a vision that I have really embraced throughout my whole career. The term convergence may seem to be new, but it's really a little bit more concentrated STEM-based effort to incorporate project-based learning. So if you think of traditional project-based learning, if you're not familiar with project-based learning, you can Google it. There's project-based learning resources out there. That's really what it's all about. It's not staying within your subject silo, but having a vision of big, grand problems to try and solve and move towards that.
And what do you think, where do you see that making progress? And what do you see challenges in practically implementing that approach?
So I see that in every aspect of what I do outside the classroom in the situation that I am in now. This convergence is in the research world all the time. Sort of like I've talked about a little bit before, where a researcher is not working in isolation. That researcher is working with many other researchers or experts to solve a very complex problem. They all are dabbling in computer science to help do the data analyzation that they have to do. AI is in every aspect of research. And I also see it in business and industry. You think about the data center build out that's going on right now everywhere in the world. That is convergence. There are multiple different disciplines and problems that have to be solved to pull that off with energy demands, heating demands, environmental demands, capacity demands. Like you just need teams of people thinking about all this all the time. So that's where I see it working right now. In schools, I still don't see so much of that because convergence in project-based learning is not easily assessed. And our main assessment metric is the main standardized tests that have been around for decades and decades and decades. And that's a big challenge. If the driver is sort of the old bubble screen, standardized assessment, that's really encouraging the ladder approach, scaling a rung ladder instead of the mountain approach. So that's a pain point. Most teachers aren't trained in how to do project-based learning. So we do what we were taught, we do what we experienced. And if we weren't really experienced in project-based learning, we're going to be a little bit more reluctant to do that. And I will say because of that, if you use an AI lesson plan generator, you're going to have a hard time getting a project-based learning lesson that's out from a lesson plan generator because those models are trained on what's most prevalent. And what's most prevalent on the internet for these models to be trained on? Things that come from teachers pay teachers and other things like that. So you're not going to get the high rigor that you're going to get from a project-based learning type thing. Project-based learning also requires a lot of scheduling demands that have to be broken out of the traditional silos of the schedules. And then you need teachers that really are willing to collaborate and kind of move in that direction. So there are plenty of hurdles, but I honestly believe AI is going to help remove some of those hurdles. And by necessity, this convergence is going to happen more and more in schools because business and industry is going to demand it. Higher ed's going to demand it.
Jeff, you mentioned earlier the evolution of standards within Pennsylvania and the 3D standards you helped develop. Does that help?
Yep. 100%. Our standards in Pennsylvania were built for this moment. They were built for project-based learning. They were built for convergence learning. They were also built with workforce development standards built into them in the STEEL standards. And they were also built for local context because in our state, the workforce demands in Philly are going to look different than the workforce demands in Pittsburgh. The workforce demands in Pittsburgh, that is primarily a Silicon Valley part two in the nation. I mean, that's where Google's AI headquarters is in Pittsburgh. In Philly, we have all the major pharmaceutical companies. In the great north of, and pretty much everywhere in between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, you have manufacturing, you have energy production, and you have farming. So our STEEL standards are built for this because the teachers can tailor project-based learning to fit the region that they're in this moment.
Yeah, lot going on in Pennsylvania, that's for sure. And you're in a good spot. So with that said, and the needs of today and making STEM work for the real world, could you think about that mindset shift that every STEM teacher needs to do or be better prepared be better prepared themselves and better preparing students for the real world?
This is it. This is my total thing for where we need to be, and that is we need to prepare our students for their future and not from our past. We have the focus that what was good enough for us is going to be good enough for the future, but that is not the case. The future is changing so dramatically. So we need to prepare students for their future, not our past. That's the biggest mindset I think that teachers need going into this world that we're in.
Fantastic. So, Jeff, I can't believe it. Our time goes super fast. You've touched upon one, a fantastic personal inspirational journey that I think will make people think about what's possible. The changes you've brought not only to different countries, but really in Pennsylvania as well, of really game changing how you're preparing folks. Before we leave, I'd just like to leave it open to you. Is there anything else you'd like to leave folks with?
I would just say, have a growth mindset. And you don't necessarily have to look to advance beyond your classroom. If you just really stay faithful to your profession, you will just see opportunities come knocking and just be ready for those opportunities and take advantage of them.
Awesome. Jeff, huge thanks for a really quick and engaging 30 minutes. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking the time to spend some time with us at Wired for STEM. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Tim. Greatly appreciate it.
Jeff, you rule. Thank you.